Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion, continued, Book 1, Chapter 14, looking now at sections 18 and 19, essentially Calvin's early conclusion about the biblical theology of the devil and demons. He highlights for us that, piggybacking off of God's permissive control of of the demons, that he will employ them at his pleasure to do a number of things. One is that although they are never allowed to conquer or oppress the believer, they can disturb and alarm us as a way to have us see the ends of evil, where this route is truly going, death, destruction, so that we would turn back to God. We also see that they can be employed to humble us, to bring us low, to deal with our pride. 2 Corinthians 12 with Paul, there's been this messenger of Satan to buffet him, and even though he prayed sincerely 3 times that it be removed, he was given the response that God's grace was sufficient. We're given this as a warning that we would never give the devil a place, and that we would resist him steadfast in the faith. Ephesians 4, 1 Peter 5. So again, we're given their nature and essentially their employments at the disposal of the sovereign God, so that we would better resist them. And what we could say may be part of the takeaway for the modern day believer: your enemy's real, and up to a point and to an extent, they can mess with you, and they can be employed for God's fatherly discipline, especially when we might have prolonged, continued, unrepentant sin in our lives. We also see an element of the manner in which we wage spiritual war against Satan and attain victory in and through Christ. Luke chapter 10 records that Jesus sends the apostles out to preach and to minister, and then when they return, Jesus, in hearing their report, says, "I beheld Satan as lightning falling from heaven." Now, what is that an indication of? What were they doing? They were preaching, and they were casting out demons. So what is it? That good ministry, and for our own day and age, good preaching from God's word, based on what Christ and the apostles have taught, brings Satan down. It's our effective means of warfare against spiritual darkness and the principalities and power that are around. So that's a manner of our warfare against him. In this final section, he deals with a notion that is common in our own day and age, even though it might be under a different guise. For us, it would be this post-Enlightenment scientific rationalism, which we can glean from the Enlightenment and science and rationalism. I'm not necessarily denigrating them in their pure form, but it's this notion that has come in history that basically says, no, we're enlightened now, and so what do we understand demons to be? Historically speaking, they are simply bad inclinations, bad impulses, sinful impulses, mental illness, perhaps, and they have no real essence or being in themselves. It's like, well, no, you might as well throw out the New Testament if you're going to hold to that notion. Your enemy is real. Michael the archangel contended with a real devil. Jude 5 tells us our enemy prowls around like a roaring lion. The demons are held in chains of darkness, awaiting the day of judgment. You don't do that to an inclination or an impulse, piggybacking off of another being. And so, what ought to be our takeaway? You ought to be on guard against, yes, your own sinful inclinations. We're not saying those don't exist, obviously, and Calvin's definitely not saying that. But you should not imagine that you have no enemy, and thereby be remiss, be less cautious, be less on guard to stand against a true adversary that we have in the devil, the demons, and the dark forces, which we say he is the prince of the power of the air. No, you need to be very on guard against those things, because it can get you to an extent, even as a believer, to alarm you, to disturb you, to distress you unnecessarily, especially if you imagine that they don't exist. Well, appreciate you listening. I hope that was a benefit.